Well, good afternoon, all of you. So this is question and answers for spiritual seekers. That means everybody, whether they know it or not. So we start off with the usual prayer for teacher and student. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So I'm open to questions, because if there are no questions, there are no answers.
I've got one.
Okay.
Well, I think that they are two.
Okay.
But they are linked. So I realized recently I had a massive lesson of life. Obviously,
Sorry, I didn't catch that. You have to repeat.
so I just went through a really big lesson.
Oh, lesson. Okay, yes.
So I realized a few things. One is emotional abuse is very common, and we don't realize it's very subtle. And when we are very sensitive, we tend to think other people will be good and they have this good side, which is also part of being very, very empathic and taking on people's, difficulties and stuff. So I realized I always try to find the best in people. And when I really connect with someone, I literally, something that I do, this is not good. I realized is I literally open the doors to my energy and to everything. And I'm like, sure, do whatever you want with me. And that's why I attract what I attract. So I was meditating actually with your meditation from, I think it was yesterday. And I realized I used to think the word boundary. And I used to think I knew what a boundary is, but actually I've got no idea what a boundary is or what boundaries are. So I think my biggest issue in there is to find what is a boundary, how do you set in a healthy way, and how can you create from there then healthier relationships? Because it's a circle, it's a wheel, and more when you're in contact with other obviously energies which are helping, because there are some that will be good, and there are some that will be less probably conscious or with you, and there are some beings in there who think when you are nice and they can abuse, So yeah, that's basically it. What is a boundary? First of all, and then how do you set them, and how do you actually keep them up? Because what I want to stop doing is actually knowing someone, connecting with them, willing to help, be there for them, and then just opening the doors and saying, yes, no, you can do whatever you want, which is not like that. So, yeah, that's the end of it.
Well, one thing we know that on a human level and on a spiritual level, we have to be loving people. Is that correct?
Yes.
That doesn't mean to say we have to be stupid. So we have to consider life, we have to revalue life in a different way. Instead of thinking that the whole of what we call life is a series of spatial or spaces that can be occupied by things or people, we have to try and shift our view and see how it can be a much more continuous thing. Because that's the better way of looking at it. And it happens on every level, whether we know it or not. We just have to be a little bit more aware of it. And we can put it under the heading of holism, to take a more holistic approach to things. So we know from our physics that there is only one matter. This is called quantum field. Do we experience it? No. That's the difficulty. There's a disparity between what is discovered, even in the area of science, and what we ourselves experience. Then we know that there's only one energy. This is scientific discovery, even of the last century. It was something like 1905, we've known it. And yet, do we experience it? No, we don't. We know that this energy, which we technically and in yoga call prana, is only one ocean, one thing. And what we call individualities with boundaries are just vortexes, as it were. We can think of it in this way, just localized, temporary, and moving on. Something like small vortexes in a river or flow of water. Some stone is there, some object is there that tends to hold the water up just for the time being, and then it moves on. So if we shift our perspective and think that life is more a flow of energy, then all the boundaries disappear. Does that mean to say then that we should not, for convenience sake, put the boundaries there? Yes. We have to have a balance between a common sense view and a theoretical view, which is more truthful, actually, not so theoretical. But from our standpoint, is a foreign concept. So we have to acknowledge our individuality for passport purposes. That's all. No more, no less. Beyond that, we have to see if we can identify ourselves with our true reality, our true being. Earlier on, we were discussing this concept and experience, actually, of pure being and how it's helpful in solving issues of mental stress, anxiety, and all the rest of it. You see, as soon as you declutch from the physical body, and as soon as you detach from it, then immediate calmness follows. Of course, your stress may return. It depends, you see, whether you are used to feeling embodied or not. And most people, that's their normal, so-called normal stance. So philosophy gives you principles, well thought out principles that are all subject to experience. The most profound of these principles is that there are 3 states of consciousness. And we know where their boundaries are. So we have a waking consciousness where we have ourselves, body, mind, separate from others. That's our experience. And a normal strategy, which doesn't really give us any great satisfaction. That is, we take every other entity, people, places, events, and we try and deal with them as best we can. And then, of course, that doesn't last so long because we glide into another world. Somehow we don't require a visa for it, where many, many possibilities are present. We can be a queen with a king and a palace and have many, many children, live for 1,000 years. We can fly in the sky with no wings. We can do incredible things. Scenes can appear and disappear rapidly. And this also has this duality in it, because there are, instead of one ego, there are many, many egos, because everything in the dream is from the dreamer. But we also have this sense of individuality. And we also have people, places, and objects. And we also have time. We may call it dream time. And it's everything operates in a kind of space. In this case, it is almost identical to the waking state. The only difference is that in the waking state, we deem a dream to be unreal. And in a dream state, we don't even think about a waking state. But all the criteria, same criteria there in both states of consciousness. And then that shifts maybe 4 or 5 times a night. It goes into an absence of any objectivity, no duality, a oneness, a state of potential creativity, a blankness. But one characteristic is there, peace, and we can register it after the fact. No duality, therefore peace. There's no objects, there are no people, places, events, there's no time, there's no space. But some entity is there watching it. A witness is there, a knower, a thinker, a witness is there, standing. And since it is only one without a second, all these states of consciousness are appearances from it, originated from it, and witnessed. The thinking aspect of it, the pure thinker, manufactures it. Now you see this area of dreamless sleep could be the highest area of potential creativity, a state of latency, where we can then manifest into all the things that we want in the other 2 states. In the first state, we can construct scenes, and we can call this daydreaming. And those daydreams will manifest as events in the waking state. It's entirely up to you. So in that sense, all the boundaries are constructed by us. And that means that the suction power that we have in the unconscious mind, if the unconscious mind is somehow reformed, if it's made to think differently, the suction that we bring toward ourselves will be different. So we have to change our thinking. And we have to consider that all the scenes and people in front may be something like dressed up versions of oneself. Dressed up versions of pure reality, pure being, in a manifested state that shifts and changes because time and space is there. Where time and space is, it shifts and changes. And even dreamless sleep has to yield ultimately to the other 2 states at some point. So that means then when we study the individualities, as we have done, you mentioned number 4, so we do it on the personality development courses, we are savvy enough to read the other person properly, and savvy enough to understand that a person's behavior also comes from some deep psychological wound within that has not yet been healed. If it's negative. If it's positive, then there's some inherent goodness in a person. Most people are a mixture of the 2, but if you take a balance, most people will weigh in on the good side. What's stopping that total manifestation of goodness to come through? Principally, self-image. Principally, taking the body and mind in such a serious way that pure identification is with it, and therein begins all our problems. Detaching from it solves the problems. Not in an impersonal way, impersonal meaning dispassionate, no. But we can rally round the instrumentations of the mind that incorporate emotions, compassion, and empathy. Really, that results in tears is true empathy for another person's sufferings. All communication is essentially conveying feelings, an innermost position in the mind where the person expressing these feelings wants you to know, this is how I am feeling. And this is expressed in so many communicative ways. It's expressed in words, it's expressed in body movements, facial expressions, all of these things. And we are very adept at reading these signals. And every animal has the same capacity to read all these signals. Please don't test this out, but there's an example. Given that there is a dog in front that you have never met before, if you look it straight in the eyes, the dog will be aggressive. It takes it as a signal that you want to attack it. And the best form of defense is attack. So be ready for some trouble. How do we deal with things in life? On the one hand, we are cautious. The animal appreciates it. You want to make friends with a dog or a horse, don't look it directly in the eye. Look away from it, approach it, let it smell your hands a little bit, let it lick you a little bit, let the hand stray to the back of the ear, give it a nice massage behind the ear, and so on, and make friends with it. Last night we had a lamb, an orphan lamb. One of the local people brought it round. It's beautiful. Quite a delight to see. So soft wool, And lamb, of course, is spring, and literally that's what they do. You know that one, the person from the city goes into the country and says, spring in the air. And the country person says, no, why should I? But you see that this is the natural mode, the springing action of the lamb. And how to make friends? Naturally, you will expect the lamb to be in unfamiliar territory. If it's even at a young age, it will be a little bit nervous, instinctively nervous. New territory, it won't approach you easily. You have to make friends with each other. Same thing with institutions, same thing with people, same thing with animals. So every person that you meet, there is an automatic boundary, physical boundary. Of course, the physical is really part of an electromagnetic system that is invisible to us. There's a oneness actually there. There's a holistic aspect to the whole of our experience. It's just that we don't tend to notice it. Why don't we tend to notice it? Because we're using only 5 photographic tools. We only have 5 photographs of the universe in front of us. And so we have to accept this limitation. But we have to cultivate a penetrating vision that goes to the heart of something. And with each increasing movement, it becomes broader, more generalized, more truthful, more subtle, until we arrive at the core. And at that core, and interesting enough, core is similar to the word corps, which is French meaning heart. We go to the heart of something, and there we find that supreme being, that infinite invisible, who himself or itself is expressing itself in all these various manifested ways, some subtle and some gross. What are the subtle areas? Mind, energy. We know where the brain boundaries are, purely physical, made from food, and activated by electrical circuits, combination of matter and energy. But you see, where's the boundary of mind? We don't know where your mind ends, my mind begins. We don't even really know where the physical magnetic field ends. We can test it out. For example, in the ancient system of the yogis who have discovered in the subtle physiology of an individual what we call nadis, subtle channels through which prana, energy, is conducted. In its gross form, we can call it the nervous system. Something like 72,000 and more of these subtle channels are there, and divided into 3 main channels, really, or identified for our purposes, for our spiritual practice, in 3 ways. 2 of them are to do with electropolarity. We call this Ida and Pingala in yoga terminology, representing male, female, sun, moon, positive, negative, and so on. So these are principal nadis. And the whole idea is to take all that energy and in yogic language, on yogic concepts, redirect it in a more subtle way so that we are able to open more and more subtle levels of consciousness, layers and layers of consciousness, each one being a discovery. So we have to shift our thinking to be sensible, understanding that there are no bad people. I think I mentioned last night, there are only bad behaviors, and there are good behaviors also, and we have to weigh up sensibly the person who's in front of us. But we have to go further. That penetrating vision will do away with all boundaries. What happens when we do away with every boundary? The reality beams through, the perfection beams through. This is one of the secrets, if you will, of spiritual healing. When we see that behind a lame person, or a mentally disturbed person even, there is the fullness of perfection standing behind that is neither defective nor deranged. And as soon as we see that, as soon as we discover that, as soon as we reveal that, the game is up. And that perfection flows through and manifests as a fully walking person, a fully sane person. That's the key to spiritual healing. But to do that, we have to elevate our own minds through our own spiritual practice. This shift doesn't come easily. It comes by reconciling the intellect and the emotions. If you have a contest between these two, emotions will always win. And so we have to rally the emotions around by doing something quite easy to it, and that is mobilizing the heart. This is why the most popular and easiest form of mobilizing this positive energy is love of God. You take a superimposed concept, a representation of the absolute, and you put your heart and soul into it. You take it in a literal way until it reveals itself for what it is, your own immortal self. But in this way, you can rally all the emotions around. Is it that this personal God does not exist? It's just a figment, just a device? No, not at all. It's a reality. As much of a reality as anything else in the universe. That is why we are in Vedanta a system of pluses. We don't go from error to truth, as Swami Vivekananda says, we go from truth to higher truth. We don't deny anything. We accept everything and everyone. Somebody asked me once at Glenstall Abbey, he said, so Hinduism, so what is that? Or what is Vedanta? What is that? What do you believe? We say, we believe in not disagreeing with anybody. Oh, that seems a good system. I said, yes, it is. See, I just agreed. So a materialist will say, oh, only matter exists. You say, I can go along with the fact that matter seems to exist, but there's more. And the idealist philosopher would say, such as Immanuel Kant, would say, there's only idealization or only ideals. Some forms of Buddhism and Vedanta would be like this. Yes, it does seem like that, but there's more. The physicist says there seems to be wave-like things in the universe that behave like waves and appear like particles. Yes, but there's more. There seems to be some ocean of energy, some kind of hidden realm where things come in and out, pop in and out of existence, electrons and positrons. It seems to be like that, but there's more. It seems to be that there is a God, a personal loving God. Yes, there is such a thing, definitely. But there is more. More? Yes. There is an entity from which this personal God comes. It's an impersonal God full of potential, full of qualities, but not possibly forms, full of potentiality. But there's more. More? Yes. There is pure being. There's a transcendent position. You cannot describe it. You cannot put in the realm of subject matter. You cannot put boundaries to it. Sri Ramakrishna was asked, what is Nirvikalpa Samadhi like, this experience, as it were, of the transcendent? Please tell us. And as he went into his samadhi, he struggled. And he came back in tears. He says, it's impossible. How can I describe such a thing? So the answer to your question basically is, we have to be sensible about dealing with the world in front. We have to assume an identity and other people's identity for passport purposes and for convenience. At the same time, we have to cultivate a penetrating vision that shows the world with all its fragmentation, seeming fragmentation, for what it is. And what is this world in front? It is nothing more than a seemingly fragmented God. If you see it like this, your world changes for you. And if you cultivate this, then the unconscious mind becomes a suction area. Thought is a suction and pulls the appropriate matching concepts, scenes, names, and forms into your area. If you are generous and kind, generosity and kind will be your world. But don't be naive about it. Don't be naive about it, because most people will try to pull you into their concept of the world. They'll try to pull you into how they read the world. So we have to have a level of discrimination. The first key practice in spiritual life is cultivating discrimination, discernment, what we call viveka. We have to decipher the world and find out what is a good thing to follow, what is not such a good thing, what company we should embrace, what company we should eschew, what actions will be in favor of all, what actions will be damaging to all. And in this way, we can discriminate. And scripture is a help in that. It tells us blatantly, this is right, this is good. In the language of the Upanishads, this is preferable, and this is pleasurable. What's the difference? Pleasurable equals painful, not at the time, but after the fact. You cannot have pleasure without pain. And so pleasure-pain syndrome as a way, as a formula for dealing with the world, is not really fulfilling, is not practically workable. That is why we have to keep repeating these lessons. When you say lessons, yes, it's a lesson. If you learned the lesson, well done. Please don't repeat it. Go on, because there are many, many lessons still to be learned. And in nature's generosity, we have unlimited opportunities to pass our exams, even after this life. According to the Vedanta, this life is just an episode. Let's call it Chapter 5, Scene 3. Next life, Scene 4. Next life, Scene 5. In between, there are many episodes. One is called Dream. And then there's a pause, a blank page. This is called a dreamless sleep. And so this cycle continues and doesn't end until we have gotten our freedom. Swami Vivekananda's last words in his commentary on Patanjali Yoga Sutras are so beautiful. So nature, our sweet mother, takes us across the shore by the hand, and having delivered us our freedom, goes back for the next soul. And so she has been going from age to age, eternally. It's a beautiful idea. Not making nature a fight or a struggle, not making it an unpleasant task, not making it an area full of beset with problems. If there are thorns on a road, put tough shoes on. If there are potholes in the world on the road, take a 4-wheel drive. You're equipped with it. use nature's forces in order to neutralize your ignorance. What is ignorance? It's forgetfulness of the fact that a portion of myself, says Krishna, a portion of myself as embodied as the soul, with all the senses together with the mind. Forgetfulness of this fact is called ignorance. Forgetfulness of your own divinity, expressed in so many different ways, in so many different religious and cultural ways. So I hope I answered your question. Next question.
Swamiji, I have a question. I spoke to somebody yesterday and they mentioned a book called The Continuum Concept. I don't know if you heard of it.
No.
There was a woman who lived with a tribe who live in nature, and they basically keep the baby attached to them or somebody in the tribe. They let the child kind of find their independence when they're ready. So it's kind of like just constant love. They don't feed them the way we do every 4 hours and let them cry in a separate room. And when this person was describing it, I just immediately thought of, Divine Mother, kind of in a way. I feel like the spiritual path is kind of returning to that concept, in a sense of feeling like you've got a mother that's with you 24/7, just loving you. Do you think, firstly, that that's a way to parent? Is that the way we should be parenting? And secondly, if so, because the lady observed that the adults in the tribe were so, she said it was just like unlike anything she'd seen. They were so contained and actually very whole and very independent, because they were actually they always knew either their mother or the loving adult was with them and always saying yes, in a sense. There was no separation, no. And it made me think, would they have almost an upper hand, in a sense that they kind of have that wholeness of feeling, do you know what I'm trying to say? I'm articulating. Yeah, I just wondered, is there something in that to kind of parent that way? Could it potentially help people's spirituality if they were raised that way?
Well, I don't know the tribe, and so I don't know the particular circumstances, but so I can only make some general comments. Firstly, in the modern society, which is much more complicated than, say, tribal societies, there is a great disadvantage. And so there's no handbook on correct parenting. I know there are so many handbooks that purport to do it, but I talk to people and they say, you see, when I have children, I will never ever say what my father or my mother said to me, and exactly that is what we are telling our children. We're repeating exactly the same thing. So I think the more complex a society, the more so-called sophisticated, the more complex our relationship with each other becomes as well. So simplicity, I don't think there's any substitute for it. Secondly, naturally, a nurturing attitude is obviously the best. And so there is no substitute for a nurturing mother. In fact, there's no higher love than a mother's love. And this comes out in the life of Ramakrishna. It is a personal demonstration of it. And it comes out also in those who accept and propagate his teachings, that the mother's love. When you say nature, you see, we have to understand the whole of nature. Nature isn't just, living in forests. We're part of nature. We can't divorce ourselves from nature. Nature has a huge range. Colloquially, from the Upanishads, it says from Brahma to a clump of grass. That's the range. So that is from the the creator to the right, to the tiniest part of the creation. And the selfishness in parenting or any other activity will obviously come from the stumbling block of ego and egoism. If you have a freedom of living in a tribal society, and tribal societies I have witnessed generally, the freedom and simplicity that is there means that it's not just a mother. There's a whole family that supports each other, and the tribe becomes a very big and yet in numerically quite a small, but it becomes a big family. So there are lots of supports. So any child naturally that grows up in a nurturing, loving environment, protected, will grow up in the same way and will grow up with a level of independence, I suppose. Independence is thwarted by overdependence. Now, in Africa, there are children who are strapped onto a mother's back, and this is unhealthy. It's unhealthy because at some stage or other, a child needs to do what is called cross-crawling. They need to integrate two spheres of the brain, and crawling does it. It's nature's way of integrating the two hemispheres of the brain. And when a child is strapped onto a mother's back and not allowed to move and only has one view of things, it not only restricts their growth, their mental growth, including their imagination and everything else. So I have witnessed that. I'm just making that remark. And the mother does it because the mother is working. The mother is plowing the field, hoeing up the field and transporting things on her head and things like that. So having to look after a child, you have no child minders there. So you have to carry the child wherever you go. I think we learn a lot from the natural way in which our fellow primates look after their children, the young. And you'll see it's all nurturing. One important thing in childhood is play. It's a vital, vital component of our biological, emotional, intellectual growth. There's a good reason why the human species has a long period of childhood. And where do we want to enjoy ourselves? By the sea and the beaches. I think I mentioned before, there's a book by Elaine Morgan, the late Elaine Morgan, who was very keen on promoting what she called the Aquatic 8 theory. And I think it makes a lot of sense. It's just a theory, but it's as good as any other theory. I think better than most theories, and convincing enough for me to say that in all likelihood, here's the caution of the language, in all likelihood, we grew as Homo sapiens sapiens on the beaches of Africa, where the sea was much higher, and in the areas such as East Africa, the Rift Valley, we learned to live in the water, we learned to communicate. We made a mutation called the FOXP2, which enabled speech. We lived on omega nourishment to increase and vitalize the capacity of the brain. And we lost our hair, and we developed a layer of fat that protected us against the cold of the water. We became smooth primates, and primates that now don't normally live in water. The only primates that don't live in water today that have a subcutaneous layer of fat under the skin, something that mammals who do live in the water have. So I think there's strong evidence for that. But the whole thing becomes a way of, there's no substitute for the nurturing aspect, there's no doubt. And I think the more complex a society becomes, the more that swings the other way into a dependency rather than an independency. because in my personal view, I have to be cautious about what I say. So I'm saying, in my personal view, I think that giving a young child, a choice, do you want this, do you want that, is to me personally absurd. How do they know what they want? And yet we still have to treat them in a reasonable way. We have to introduce some reasoning to neutralize over-emotional behavior as well. So this is my 2 cents worth on that subject.
Thank you.
So we had, you have a question? You have something in the book?
Yes. Have this
So there's one participant who says, you see these daily thoughts, please you will explain. I thought they were self-explanatory, but never mind. Let's try and see. So you read it out, what? And then tell me, once you read it out, tell me what is your question.
It's just a basic discussion, Swami, just what
Okay,
we've understood.
yes,
And
yes.
It's day 18
Is it?
from the book.
Okay.
Thought is, with greatest skill, most carefully, and the pictures are a group of masks, what has been pictured here. With greatest skill, most carefully, carved out defense strategically. Animated mask world to face, adapted to each time and place. For every scene and every task, crafted out for truth to mask. Written acts of scenes conceive, played by impressions we leave. Thus, when actor's part is cast, role and actor's thoughts broadcast, place God in church for exaltation, when true God is in congregation. Drama masks in ancient Greece, made from wood and cotton fleece, are not preserved in glass displays, since none survived those older days. When made-up mask is set aside, when truth is one without divide, when even stage lights disconnect, truth stands ready to connect. And the prayer is, O Lord, grant me the vision to see thee peeping out playfully behind each of thy masks as people, places, and scenes. Let me recite thy lines from thy script and never falter or question thy plot or design, for I am made in thy image.
Good. So,
It's we can again connect these two, the Enneagram and the masks and
yes, so you see, those who've been on the Enneagram will understand this. And for those who don't, we have to understand the word personality. Persona means a mask. And this refers to the dramatic days of ancient Greece, where people assembled in an amphitheater and the audience didn't really have a good view of the actors and their expressions. I imagine that they had fire or torches to light up a stage. So how do you convey emotions? They constructed masks. And the masks, obviously, we could, if any survive, we can put them in a showcase. But the interesting thing is, if we say a person is like this or like that, we like them, we dislike them, we get on with them, we don't get on with them. I wish they could improve this characteristic, that characteristic. We're mixing some things up. We're mixing a subject and object up. What we call a personality is just a series of behavioral traits that are stitched into a mask. That's all. And as Shakespeare said, all the world's a stage, we are but players. So my funny example is always the same. I'm never tired of repeating it, but other people are tired of listening to it. So the great Shakespearean actor Irving plays the part of Hamlet. And when the performance is over, he takes his mask off, his makeup off, he takes his medieval clothes off. He doesn't sustain his part. He doesn't go home to his wife and say, "Oh, mine wench, place thy victuals on my table, that I may enjoy thy repast." All the Shakespearean language is gone. Now every actor that plays on a stage, I'm repeating these concepts that you've heard many times, they don't make this confusion. Irving never ever thinks he is Hamlet. No actor on the Hollywood screen ever believes that they are the character they play. They may step into the character's emotional field, behavioral field, in order to get an accurate portrayal. It's called character acting. And they may feel for a time being that they are that person, but hidden beneath it, there's always the awareness of themselves as individuals playing the part. It's as if there was an independent entity watching two things, the performance and the person normally assumed as I. And this, we may say, is something like the waking state. The waking state of consciousness, we're playing the part. Let's play the part well. The earlier question was about individualities, boundaries, and so on and so forth. And my reply was, actually, we are pure being without boundaries. But how is it we feel embodied with boundaries and other people have the same boundaries? Well, we have to unlearn that a little bit, but not abandon it, because that becomes impractical. So for passport services and for the facility or the faculty of playing our part, to play the game, we assume a part, we assume a role. And then we play the game well, but we have to understand that whoever we interact with is also an entity playing a role. We have to get past that role. Now, there's another way of watching the drama. We can sit in the audience. If you watch a film, you will still think that the scenery is real, particularly in the old movies. Now you can see it, but in the old days, we never saw any difference. You didn't wonder. There's a beautiful mountain scene behind, and the actor is in front, sitting or talking to somebody. We don't wonder why every hair is still in place, despite the fact that there must be wind everywhere. It's just scenery, just painting behind it, looking very real. And in black and white, of course, we can get away with many things. You can actually put the whole picture in black and white. You don't have to paint any scenery. But yet, when somebody cries in the movie, you cry. When somebody laughs in the movie, you laugh. You're so identified with this unreality. And this is what we call life. We so identify with the scenes in front of us. We take them to be real. And then we wonder. We go to a professional, a psychologist or something. "Oh, please save me." Well, an enlightened psychologist will say, save you from what? From the unreal movie? From all the emotions that you're identifying with, that you're superimposing on yourself, that you're projecting, is the psychological speak for it, on yourself? Why would I save you from the unreality? So if they were philosophically truthful, that's what they'd say. It wouldn't work, because they have to, first of all, they have to empathize and understand the other person's position, and then guide a person toward that kind of understanding. Secondly, they want to get paid. So to reveal all the truth in one go, it means that in one visit it's finished. I often ask the question, and I know I've said it before, and the question is, who was the most ancient psychologist of all time? I can ask the question here. We have a few people here.
Krishna.
Yes, so they've asked and answered the question previously. Yeah, it's Krishna. Because you see, in the Bhagavad Gita, the first chapter is on Arjun? Visharda Yoga. Yes. The yoga of Arjun's despondency. Not just despondency, deep depression, nervous breakdown. What are the symptoms? Shaking, grieving, tears, irrationality. So we know it's a nervous breakdown, desperateness, grief. So all of these symptoms are there. When you're in sorrow, the breathing gets upset, shaking takes place. That's why one of the at least temporary physical adjustments will be, please stabilize your breathing and stabilize your nervous system a little bit. Calm down. Count to 10. If you're angry, go outside, count to 10. That's the normal recommendation. But don't count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and come back. No, take your time. It's an opportunity for you to pause and go into a state of recollectedness. We're able to address the problem or the issue in a calmer, more rational way. And so that is there, a psychological condition manifesting in physicality. So Krishna goes straight to the point. He puts the remedy out straight away. He puts out the value of strength straight away. Where has this faint-heartedness come from? Stand up, be strong, do your duty, play your part. It's just a part. And do it well. Because your real central indwelling self is the infinite invisible, and water cannot wet it, and fire cannot burn it, and wind cannot dry it. And you are that. And every other entity is that also. You cannot kill, nor can you be killed. You cannot slay, nor will you be slain. So that message is enforced over and over and over again, over 18 chapters. 17 chapters if you eliminate the first one, the condition, description of the condition. So this was the great psychological technique. It was not, oh Arjun, please lie down here. I put a couch there for you. Tell me all about your childhood. Tell me how your father was and how your mother was. Tell me how you're deprived and sad. Tell me how you felt abandoned and alone. Tell me this and that and the other. Play the old record. And how old are you now, Arjun? Oh, I'm 30-something. I see. Nearly 40 probably. Oh, I see. Tell me again. Play the old record again. Well, you see, when I was 4 years of age. But how old are you? Something must have changed between 4 and 40. Why don't you put something new in, please? Why don't you invest in some new way of thinking? So this was the psychology of Krishna, and goes counter to many psychological techniques today that assume that we have an impoverishment, a gap, a deficit. We start off with, I am wrong, I am defective, nobody knows me, nobody understands me, poor me. Well, you won't help somebody who says, yes, you are poor, you are weak. No, inside you is infinite possibilities. Stand up and express it, please. So what is ignorance essentially? What is sin essentially? It is weakness. So I see that Marina's hand is up. Yes?
Yes, Swamiji. So, because I remember the first day we met, we spoke about energy. And I remember one of the questions I did say to you, it was how did you protect it? The energy. And I remember is when you spoke to me about the subconscious thing, what do we actually believe we deserve? And that's how we project it. And then we encounter all these situations. So, I mean, that's how I was seeing it. But then now I was reflecting. So really what they call boundaries is something that comes from the belief of individuality then. Does that mean that they don't see everything as a whole? So then that means I'm doing actually something that makes sense. Because what I do normally is how I do handle is I just see where it comes from, and then I just don't react. I just give love, and I just let them do whatever. Um, but yeah, because I've been hearing so much the word boundary. So now I was reflecting. So that is something that comes from not seeing them the all.
Swami Vivekananda was asked once, Jesus said, turn the other cheek. Do you agree with this? Because you talk about strength all the time and vigor and manliness. Just echoing the message of the Gita. And in an attempt to turn around the whole psychology of the Indian nation. Stand up. Don't be weak. Don't allow yourselves to be trod on. Revolutionary talk in the circumstances, which made the British not like him so much. And Sister Nivedita carried on that message also. So he was asked, in the light of what you said to our nation, with a plan of campaign, like a military campaign in India, from Colombo to Almora, do you agree? Should we all turn the other cheek? Now we have to understand that there are two types of saints. The administrative saint, we might call it, the person who lives in the working, waking life, and the other one who is basically living a life of non-injury. It would represent something like a minority. Should you turn the other cheek? Vivekananda didn't answer immediately. He said, yes, the first time. Second time, punch him on the nose. So we have to make sure that we're not being, irrational, that emotions don't take over. And I don't think it's very useful to think of everything, every incident, and every behavior and counter behavior in terms of energy. I don't think that's very useful. It's become a modern day habit. So a person says, oh, I can't go to this place, I don't like the energy. Or I don't like that person, I don't like the energy. Or I was in a mood and I found this energy. To couch everything in the language of energy might be a little misleading. And I think we have to rather couch everything in the language of spirit. It is all spirit, because that's the fact of it. That's the truth of it. And if we look at what is energy, it's God's energy. And if we look at God's energy, it's infinite. And that means it will never be applied in a weakening way. It will always be applied in a strengthening, positive way, in a divine way. It's all God's energy. You did a lot of work. Are you tired? Well, if I think I am an embodied entity and it's all up to me, yes. But if you think it's all infinite God's energy, no. It's not my energy. Thank you. Oh, you drove to Belfast. You must be so tired. No, the car did all the work. I did all the sitting. Why should I be tired? Ask the car. That's something different. And the biggest telling if deleterious effect on our energy will be anxiety. Anxiety, a form of, I'm doing something, I wish I was doing something else, or I see some difficulty in the future that has not arrived, or I'm in a present circumstance that makes things awkward and I don't know how to deal with it. But shifting your attention in a different way will relieve you of all that burden. Just as Krishna shifted Arjuna's attention and raised him up, not lowered him down. Don't lower yourself or others down. Raise yourself up, raise others up also. Actually, if you raise yourself up, it will have the effect of raising others up also, in an unspoken way. So that's all we have time for. It's 8:02. So thank you. I hope that was useful in some way to you.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Swami.
Thank
Thank
you,
you very much.
Swamiji.
Thank you, Swami.
Merci beaucoup, Swami.
Merci beaucoup. Bonne soirée.
Bonsoir.
Merci.